Debate over Scottish identity. Use of Scottishness questioned. Humza Yousaf, the First Minister of Scotland, has become a focal point in a discussion regarding Scottish identity. The debate was ignited by social media comments questioning his Scottish identity, contrasting views on civic versus ethnic nationalism. While some argue that Yousaf's identity as Scottish is inclusive and civic, others maintain an ethno-nationalist perspective, suggesting his Pakistani heritage disqualifies him from being truly Scottish. As seems to be typical of Grok, that's a very, very reasonable, impartial and centrist take on the events of the last 24 hours because everybody's been melting down about this on X for the last 2 days, culminating in this fantastic piece of gibbering stupidity from the king of such things, Owen Jones. Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, wrote a perfectly reasonable piece for The Telegraph where she simply explained that she will never be truly English, and here's why, from her own lips. And Owen Jones responded to it with this: "Don't be so effing ridiculous, you're English, get over it." Oid. We're living in an era where everybody can be anything. If you're a big hairy ass welder and you say you're a woman, you are. Yeah, you definitely are. If you're a sparrow-boned 5'2" disabled lesbian and you decide you're a man, you can be. You just put some socks down your wabs and you're good to go. We're living in an era where anyone can be anything. Yeah, Elizabeth Warren can be entitled to steal federal funding intended for ethnic minorities, even though she's blonde-haired and blue-eyed, by simply claiming she's Native American. Because if you feel like you are, then you definitely are. But all of a sudden, when Suella Braverman, an intellectual and internationally respected woman who served as the Home Secretary of the UK, when she logically and reasonably elucidates very specific reasons as to why she isn't, Owen Jones's response is to simply swear at her and say, yes, but you're definitely English though. Get over it. Two things. One, obviously staggering mind-melting hypocrisy, as always, from these lefty lunatics. Because when it suits them, they can just tell someone what they definitely are, and you just have to get over it. Yeah, with a straight face he says it. Try saying, you're a man. Get over it. When you've got some irate trans woman throwing hooks about in the local GameStop. Don't these people advocate arresting people for misgendering someone? So there you go. Point one. Hypocrisy, as usual. This is why everybody hates them. And point two, didn't you say you're a practicing homosexual, Owen? Is that right? Is that what you said? Well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So, you're straight, you're massively into tits, get over it. Right then, let's get down to brass tacks. First of all, I'll show you what started the whole thing, which was a discussion between Constantine, a bloke who, admittedly, I didn't really like for the last sort of 2 or 3 years, because I just thought he was a wet lefty Remainer who saw which way the wind was blowing, but he is increasingly becoming much more reasonable in my eyes. Perhaps he's on the same journey as everybody else, starting out liberal and being dragged to the right because reality isn't politically correct. Anyway, that's the genesis of this argument that's raging. Here it is.
A very unpopular thing that I'm not English, I will never be English. I don't think Rishi Sunak is English. We're both British, but we're not English.
No, you weren't born here, you were an immigrant.
No, but my son was born here. I don't think my son is English.
I would say that Rishi Sunak is as English as Tizer and Y-fronts, right? He is absolutely English. He was born and bred here. And I wouldn't say that the colour of his skin makes him any
He's
less.
a brown Hindu. How is he English?
Because he's born and bred here.
First of all, I resent that soft, limp-wristed frisp there telling us that it's as English as Y-fronts and Tizer. It's like he's having a pop there instead of picking any of the hundreds of very, very English inventions and cultures and customs and all of those nuanced things he could have picked. He said Y-fronts because they sound stupid and embarrassing and nobody wears them anymore. And Tizer. And I'm Northern and drank a lot of Tizer as a child. I'm pretty certain Tizer was possibly invented in England at some point, but it was sold to bars in the 70s. So it's been a jock company for at least 50 years. Everyone used to know that. Remember the old adverts? Bars Iron Brew. made in Scotland from girders or whatever it was. It was a rock star on a stage. It's not quintessentially English if it's been Scottish for the last 50 years, is it? Especially not when you use his argument, which seems to be all you have to do is be born there, and then a little bit later, you are that thing. So if Tizer ended up in Scotland 50 years ago, surely Tizer's Scottish, isn't it? I've always preferred Iron Brew myself, but I'm a northerner. My nana used to get me a bottle of that and a new Woolly book every year for Christmas. And if you go and read Suella's piece, it's totally logical, 100% factually accurate. She says, on one side of the argument stands Fraser Nelson, insisting that being born in England automatically makes you English. On the other, Constantine said that Englishness is an ethnic identity and isn't simply inherited through geography. When pressed with a scenario, if his children were born in Japan, would they be Japanese? Fraser agreed they would be. Ha! Because Fraser's got a head full of horse shit. Fraser doesn't believe, I do not believe for a second that Fraser Nelson actually believes what he's shoveling. I don't believe it. I think Fraser Nelson, like almost everybody at The Spectator, what a wet, limp-wristed rag The Spectator is. I don't believe those people stand for anything. Like all of our political class, that's scared to tell you what they actually believe because they think it'll negatively affect the bottom line. They think that centrism is the best way to shift copies of The Spectator. So they'll tell you they believe that up is down and left is right. There is no way on God's green earth that anyone with a fully functioning brain thinks that an ethnicity is an invention like a gender. It's an apt example. If you believe that having two big hairy swinging plums and 8 inches on the slack makes you unable to truly be a woman, then you cannot believe that being Chinese and having a Chinese wife and coming from 50 generations of Chinese, but then getting knocked up in Beijing, dropping the sprog as soon as you land in Heathrow and then getting a council house in Shoreditch, just instantly makes you English. It is an ethnicity as well as many other things. Also, that was a bad analogy. There are no council houses left in Shoreditch on account of the fact that 8 million people that definitely aren't English have now moved into them all. Suella is an excellent writer and she makes a good point here. Englishness has never been static. From the arrival of the Romans to the Saxons and the Vikings and the Normans, English culture has absorbed and adapted, and how many generations must pass before you can claim to be English? It's a question without an easy answer. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. It's somewhat fluid, but she goes on to say, in my own case, I disagree with Fraser. I was born here, raised speaking the Queen's English. Certainly, she does a better job of that than me. And she was educated in England, but I am not English. My parents, members of the Indian diaspora, were born in Kenya and Mauritius. They acquired British citizenship, but they were not and would never be considered English. For Englishness to mean something substantial, it must be rooted in ancestry, heritage, and yes, ethnicity, not just residence or fluency. Very succinctly put, Suella, well done. Clearly, the brown Indian woman has got more of a root in England than Keir Starmer does, and yet he's English and she isn't. Kind of embarrassing that, isn't it? To sum up, yes, it's complicated, but English is an ethnicity. I'm an American now, but I wouldn't claim to be more of an American than John Wayne or Clint Eastwood or someone who's been over here for generations. These things are complicated, and I guarantee you this, if two pasty, blonde-haired, blue-eyed northern Scots drop the sprogs in India or Pakistan or China or Japan or Somalia, none of the inhabitants in those countries, not a single one of them, would point at the newborn baby conceived in a distant land and say, not only is that child Somalian, Japanese, Chinese, deplete as applicable, not only is that child definitely Chinese, Japanese, delete as applicable, it's even more Chinese or Japanese than Chairman Mao or Miyamoto Musashi or however you want to pick. It's a preposterous idea. Everybody on Twitter is making it much more complicated than it needs to be. And I think anybody with a fully functioning brain who isn't pretending to be pig ignorant because I think it's going to help them sell books or magazines or YouTube channels or whatever else, I don't think any of them thinks it's complicated either, to be honest. But that's just what I think. if you were conceived in Mogadishu, but you happen to have been born in the back of a tomato van while crossing through the Channel Tunnel, and you now claim to therefore be more English than an 11th generation Morris dancer, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear the lunacy that you're going to spout. It also makes me think. The channel reference got me thinking, if your parents are Chinese, but you're born at sea, if you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on a cruise ship, what are you, a mermaid? This stuff it's not complicated, is it? Everybody knows the answer. The kid's what the parents were. But that's just my opinion. If you think I'm a raving lunatic, or you think Owen Jones is totally tolerant and consistent and reasonable, you know, spitting hatred at people who deny that you're allowed to self-identify as whatever you like, but then instantly taking the exact opposite position as soon as you disagree with Owen Jones, please let me know in the comments, because I love talking to raving lunatics. All right? Thanks for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you all tomorrow. All right? Toodle pip. Cheers.